Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the apocalypse and the co-prophet of the end times. This will be part 8 in my series on the abomination of desolation, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet, in which Jesus said, we must read and understand if we are going to join Jesus in the millennium. And so far we have found out that there are actually 4 different abominations of desolation. And they are precipitated by 4 different individuals. And they affect 4 different groups. The same 4 groups who will reign with Jesus during the 1,000 years of peace. Now those 4 abominations of desolation are found in the last 6 chapters of Daniel, which are also known as the vision chapters. And Daniel sealed up his prophecy at the direction of an angel by using hidden verse and chapter structures. Many of these include Hebrew literary devices such as pairs, parallelism, chiasms, and so on. Now I have substituted X's in place of the words in these verses so that we can concentrate on the amazing structures which Daniel used to hide his prophecy. And I want to compare these structures in all 6 of the vision chapters. And we will begin by looking at chapter 7, which is the first of the 6 vision chapters. Now chapter number 7 is not an abomination of desolation chapter, but it is the first of the 6 vision chapters. And remember, the angel told Daniel to seal up his vision. And we rearrange these verses to understand the prophecy by first noting that in verses 6, 17, and 23, Daniel uses the word for twice in each of those 3 verses. And he does not do that in any of the other verses. Therefore, we know that there is a relationship between those 3 verses. And when we put them on a horizontal line and let the other verses fall where they may around those verses, then we understand the prophecy. For example, we know that verses 24 through 28 are related to verses 7 through 11. And there is also a prophecy in the verse structure itself, because there are 6 verses, and another 6, followed by 5 verses, and another 5 verses. And what that tells us is that the Antichrist, whose number is 666, will be defeated by Mary's rosary, which number is 555. And we are going to discover that that prophecy is found in all of Daniel's 6 vision chapters. And in fact, that coincides with our Lord's prophecy in Matthew's Olivet Discourse, and in Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. And that is that 666 is always followed by 555. The Antichrist is always defeated by Mary's rosary. That is the weapon Jesus will use. And now let's look at Daniel chapter number 8, which is the first of the abomination of desolation chapters. Now here in chapter number 8, the abomination of desolation is personified by the Antichrist. And he brings death and destruction to the holy martyrs, who are one of the 4 groups who will reign with Jesus during the millennium. In verse number 24, the Antichrist kills many people. And Daniel has arranged the verses in pretty much a straight chiasm. On the left-hand side, we see verses 1 through 13. Verse number 14 is sort of like a hinge verse. And then verses 15 through 27 are printed in reverse. And therefore, we see a relationship between each side of the chiasm. For example, in verses 1 and 2 and 27 and 26, the word vision is repeated 3 times. And the rest of the structure is accomplished by changing the topic. In other words, verses 3 through 8 are about the war between the ram and the goat, and verses 9 through 13 are about the Antichrist. And once again, the verse structure helps to understand the prophecy, and also the structure itself contains the same prophecy we saw in chapter number 7, and that is that 6 verses, that is 3 through 8 and 20 through 25, are followed by a set of 5 verses, 9 through 13 and 15 through 19. In other words, 66, the number of the Antichrist, is followed by and defeated by 55, the number of Mary's Rosary. And now let's look at chapter number 9. Chapter number 9 is a warning from Daniel to the nation of Israel and Jerusalem, and it is for the converted Jews, another one of the 4 groups who will reign with Jesus during the 1,000 years of peace. And this is the third different structure, and he uses pairs and parallelism to seal up his prophecy. And on the left-hand side, we see 6 pairs of verses. On the right-hand side, we see 5 pairs of verses, and we see 5 verses in the middle which stand apart. And we find out that Daniel is telling us that the last 2 verses in each column are related. They are the prophetic verses. 26 and 27 and 11 and 12 are actual prophecies. 16 and 17 are exhortations. And since we know that these 6 verses are prophecies from Daniel for the end times to the modern nation of Israel and Jerusalem, we know that this destruction will be caused by the prince in verse 26, who is the prince of Persia. And Daniel's solution is the same as he has given before, and that is this 6 pairs of verses are followed by 5 verses and 5 pairs. In other words, 66, the number of the Antichrist, is followed by 555, the number of Mary's Rosary. Now, chapter number 11 is a warning from Daniel to the raptured Protestants, that they must be ready at all times. And this coincides with what Jesus himself said in the Olivet Discourse, that he will come like a thief in the night. And the person who personifies the abomination of desolation is Antiochus Epiphanes, who is the 5th of the 6 kings of the north. And therefore, the warning for the raptured Protestants has already come thousands of years ago. That's why we know they must be ready at all times. And now, Daniel organized these verses in a very interesting fashion. The first 4 verses talk about 6 ancient kings. Therefore, he sets up 2 sequences of the number 4 and the number 6. But we don't understand the pattern until we look at the last 15 verses. And Daniel sets these up by listing 4 items in verse 33, 4 items in verse number 38, and 4 items in verse number 43. Therefore, he is setting up 2 more patterns, a set of 3 4s and a set of 3 5s, and a pattern of things as well as verses. Therefore, we go back to the first 4 verses, and we realize it's very likely that the 4 verses would be followed by 2 more sets of 4 verses, 5 through 8 and 9 through 12. And when we do that, we find that there are 18 verses in the middle, and therefore they are very likely also set up in a pattern of 6, 6, 6. And this is the only one of Daniel's chapters in which the 3 6 verses, 6, 6, 6, which of course are again followed by 3 sets of 5 verses, 5, 5, 5, indicating that the Antichrist will be defeated by Mary's Rosary. In this chapter, there are 3 sets of 4s at the beginning, and that is a warning to America specifically and to Barack Obama, because 444 is his number in Bible prophecy and the number of the United States. And what Daniel is telling us with this verse structure is that America, 444, and Barack Obama will be defeated by 666, that is the Antichrist, who in turn will be defeated by 555, in other words, Mary's Rosary. And now let's look at one of the most interesting chapters, and that is 10 and 12 combined. Now, we've already seen how the abomination of desolation affects three of the groups, the raptured Protestants, the holy martyrs, and the converted Jews. And here in chapter 10/12, we will see how it affects the fourth group who will reign with Jesus during the 1,000 years of peace, and that is the protected Catholics. And we will find out who it is that causes the Catholics to flee into the desert, and that is the false prophet. And we notice that this new chapter is pretty much arranged as a regular chiasm, with chapter 10 on the left, that is verses 1 through 17, and chapter 12 on the right, verses 1 through 13 on the right, and also the last 4 verses of chapter 10. Daniel reveals one of the most important prophecies in this new chapter 10/12. Because when he talks about the continual sacrifice in verse number 11, in chapter number 12, he reveals what he is talking about through the corresponding verse in chapter number 10, and that is verse number 3. In other words, the continual sacrifice in 11 is explained when Daniel says, "I ate no desirable bread, nor neither flesh nor wine entered into my mouth." In other words, the continual sacrifice must be the Holy Eucharist. And that's extremely important for us to understand in these end times. Because chapter 10 and 12 is a warning to the protected Catholics, and the one who brings the abomination of desolation is the false prophet, and what he will do is to remove the holy sacrifice of the Eucharist from all Catholic masses throughout the world. But what is the solution to the false prophet taking away the Holy Eucharist from all Catholics, and in fact from all Christians? And the answer is the same as Daniel has given in all these other chapters, and that is that Mary's rosary will defeat the Antichrist. In this case, there are 4 sixes. 6 verses, 6 more verses, 6 verses, 6 more verses, all followed by 5 verses and 5 verses. It should be fairly obvious that Daniel is telling us what we must do to defeat the Antichrist in these end times. And in fact, we see this same answer in the way Daniel has arranged his 12 chapters. The first 6 chapters, that is the historical chapters, are followed by the 5 vision chapters. And don't forget, there are only 5 vision chapters because 10 and 12 is the same chapter. None of this is accidental. Daniel's message should be fairly clear by now. So in conclusion, this program was just a brief look at how Daniel used hidden verse and chapter structures to seal up his prophecies about the abomination of desolation. And my recommendation for you is, don't wait until the forces of the Antichrist come knocking on your door before you learn how to pray the weapon which Daniel says will defeat the Antichrist. And as always, I do offer a free copy of my book, Revelation Unraveled. On the other hand, I am running out. This may well be the last program I make this offer. So you can either write to the address you see on your screen, or you can read my book right now. Go to my Third Eagle Books channel and click on the Revelation Unraveled book in the banner, or you can go to my William Tapley channel, and currently I am reading my book.